GameWorks Studio Indianapolis used to be an arcade here in Indy. It was awesome.
So GameWorks was this big idea put together to kind of take the arcade of your childhood and bring it into the adult world.
This actual location in Indianapolis was the first GameWorks. It was later converted to GameWorks Studio when they started making what's called the GameWorks flagships, which are a full-scale restaurant, bar, arcade put together.
Whenever I started going there more often, it really became a home away from home for me. It was a very laid-back environment, very good staff, good people.
When you would just walk into the place, your senses would be overwhelmed with music and lights and the attraction modes from the arcade machines. The staff was really awesome. The layout was great. Hundreds of games.
Had a lot more fun, a really good vibe that was here. There was always local groups that came and always played, our fighting games that was here. There was awesome DDR players that came in on a regular basis.
And it kind of served as this gathering point for everybody who liked to play video games and do nerdy things in Indianapolis. And really, anybody who was anybody went to GameWorks.
GameWorks Studios became that place where teenagers were allowed. They were okay to be here. The people, it wasn't a real hangout for the too young a crowd or too old a crowd, so it kind of became the place where, the tweens to the 25-year-olds could hang out and play games together and really form kind of a gamer community in the area.
Anytime you had a bad day, you come down to GameWorks, your day will always turn into a good day.
The GameWorks at Indianapolis actually has its own ghost story. It first came to light to me when I was talking to a security guard in the mall. And he said that late at night he had to call up the manager of GameWorks Indianapolis because he saw something moving in the arcade. And when they went back and they looked at the security footage, they couldn't find any evidence that anyone had been in the arcade. But what the guy described was this white blur.
The white blur.
The white blur.
The white blur is it's a legend from GameWorks.
I guess it's one of those things that you would consider to be like Sega GameWorks' own personal folk legend. Everyone who's ever worked here before me and after me has always said that there's something that just like emanates in this building.
We had multiple times where the machines in the arcade decided to move on its own. Doors deciding to not ever want to open up for you.
There's countless little stories, whether it be security guards seeing claw machines moving on their own at night, or people seeing odd reflections in arcade machines.
To where if you're here early as the manager working, getting the store started up, turning on games, you kind of walking into one area and all of a sudden you just kind of see this kind of off to the side. At the corner of your eye, you'll maybe see something duck behind a game or like flitter across some of the rafters or something. And we never really gave it a name. It was just never really talked about it. But whenever someone would say something like, when I got here this morning, I could have swore I was the only person in the building, but I could have swore I saw something in the corner of my eye. And someone else would go, what did it look like? Like, I don't know. It's just kind of like a blur.
The reason they call the white blur is because you just see kind of, it looked like a person in all white walking by, or like kind of really quickly kind of scooting by.
There's 101 tales about it, but what nobody really seems to agree on is who is the white blur.
At least one of the stories that I heard about the white blur was that it was a kid who fell off the top floor. That was one of the things that I heard about the white blur.
I personally think the white blur is just someone that, possibly died in the mall And it was a person that actually used to like the arcade a lot, so their ghost just decided to just hang out where it used to like to go to.
No one really knows what it is, but everyone here at some point has seen it.
Have I ever seen the white blur? Well, I'll tell you this. I don't really personally believe in ghosts, but I would also be lying to you if I told you I'd never seen the white blur.
Yes, I've seen the white blur.
I have seen the white blur.
I have seen the white blur. I've seen the white blur probably more than anybody since I've been in this building for the past 12 years.
I worked at GameWorks Indianapolis for a couple years, and the arcade was a really rambunctious place with tons of lights, tons of music, sound, and games blasting your face, and people laughing, and fry cooks flipping hot wings and sauce and grease flying all over the place. And then when it came down to close, it all just stops, and all the lights get shut off, and the games get turned off, and the grills in the back stop sizzling, and you're left in this giant 27,000 square foot space of darkness. And closing up at night, I mean, not just me, many of the managers who had worked there have talked to me about that they get chills just closing that arcade, because when it shut off, I mean, it was quiet.
I was inside of the arcade by myself closing. I let the person that was working with me go ahead early. And I was closing the arcade by myself. I'm walking through, doing my normal checks, closing everything down. And in the back corner of the arcade, I see something run by super fast. Just a big white blur just right past. And I just froze. I didn't know what to do because I'm like, oh, okay, is there someone still in here with me, So, I checked the whole arcade to look around to see if, there was anyone there. There was no signs of, anyone in the arcade.
One of the weirdest things that I ever saw was when I was cleaning up at the end of a shift. My manager at the time was this nice woman named Stephanie, and she was in the back of the house counting the money, and we had these little walkie-talkies so that we could communicate, and all the machines had turned off. Well, there's this big red machine that's kind of a simulator that you'd play and it would rock you around, and the machines had all been off for probably 30 minutes. I was reaching the end of cleaning up, and then suddenly this machine starts to lurch, and I'm looking at it kind of moving about, and I get on my little walkie-talkie and I say, Stephanie? The machine's name was Sumo. I said, is Sumo supposed to be moving right now? And I hear on the other end, no. And I go, say, well, it is. And she says, I'll be right out. So she comes out, and by the time she comes out, the thing had stopped moving. Which made it all that much more eerie, and that was one of the first times I ever really saw something, I guess, extreme in the arcade.
The creepiest one for me is, and this isn't that I saw it, but I just attributed it to it because there's no other explanation. I walk into the laser tag, I walk back to the back, there's a power room back there to turn all the lights on. I go to reach for the door of the power room, which is open a little bit, because unless you slam it shut, it doesn't close all the way. It's open a little bit. I go to reach for the door, and the door literally goes and closes as I go to grab the door handle. That freaked me out because, in my head, I'm going, there's no way that door closed, because you have to push on that door to get it to close all the way. You have to put pressure on it, and I hadn't even touched the doorknob, and the door literally closed and I proceeded to walk out the back door that's just right next to it, put the kickstand down, and I stood there for a couple minutes and recollected myself and said, okay, there's got to be somebody in that room, because there's no way that door should have been able to close if there's nobody in there, because you have to push on it, and I mean push on it to get it to close all the way, which is why it's always cracked open a little bit at the end of the night. So I waited a minute, I stood there, I contemplated calling mall security to have them do a walkthrough. I'm like, I'm not worried about this. So I went over the door. I stuck the key in the door. I unlocked the door. I said, I'm going to open this door. If there's somebody in there, you better be standing against the back wall or we're going to have a problem. And, you know, I'm not a small guy, so I can pretty much handle anything that comes at me. If I can't, I'm going to hit it with a stick. But I open the door, and there's nothing in there. There's absolutely nothing in that room. And I'm going, okay, this is just weird. I hadn't left. I had my eye on the door the whole time. No one could have gotten in or out of that room. There's no way to climb out of the room. Like, there's just nothing. But that door closed itself. And that was like the weirdest thing that happened that kind of gave me pause. And I was like, all right, chalk it up to the white blur, kept moving.
It was after the store closed. I was waiting around for my dad to come pick me up.
And they were about 15 at the time, and one of them, their parents weren't going to be there till later, so he had to stay with me after close. So he kind of followed me around after I got done cleaning up. And eventually we just sit down on the counter and wait for his dad. And in the process, you know, the arcade's closed, all the lights are off. You know, that deafening silence of the arcade that maybe, like, all you could really hear is maybe the air conditioning going off.
Right in front of me, there was a game that had a bar that was about waist height, and it went down to the floor, so it was kind of an L shape. And I just saw a pair of legs kind of walk across, you know, kind of quickly walk across under the bar. I didn't see anything over the bar.
And suddenly I see his eyes go wide and travel across the arcade, and he shakes his head and goes, "Whoa." And I said, "What was that?" And he says, I swear, dude, I just saw somebody walking through the arcade. And then, like, I blinked and he was gone. And at that point, I'd become really comfortable with the ghost story of the white blur. And I said to him, "Oh, it's the white blur." And I told him about some of the times that I had seen the white blur and some of the stories I had heard about the white blur.
I walked out. I went out the service door, and I met my dad at the front. And he said, you know, "Who are the people that were with you?" And I said, you know, "The people. It was only, you know, this guy, you know." And he said, "No, there was the guy sitting on the counter, and then there was somebody else standing next to you guys."
Now, me and the boy at the time were the only ones who were actually in the arcade. I was just kind of watching him until his parents showed back up.
That was kind of funny. It was kind of freaky. I really didn't like freak out or anything. I just kind of chuckled and kind of let it you know, go. But
I've also had a moment when I was here inside of the theater, and I've heard like some weird noises coming from the back rooms. It sounded like a person yelling, actually, which like also spooked me super hardcore.
So there's, like I said, there was an occasion where I was inside of Jurassic Park. So there's a window in the back of Jurassic Park when you're sitting in it. And I'm sitting there and I'm working on the game, trying to get the door open on it because the key was jammed. And I, like, the screen is blacked out. And I was trying to get the remote to turn it on and trying to get the door open. The door wouldn't open. I started cursing at the thing. I look up, and the reflection in the actual TV screen, I kind of just see, like, kind of go by. And I'm like, what the heck was that? Because that game is sitting in the middle of the store. There's no games behind it. There's nothing should have been able to cause that reflection in my mind. So when I look up at the screen and I see this go by, I'm kind of thinking like, okay, well, maybe somebody's here, maybe there's a crew member here or something, but there was nobody in the store, nobody was there, but that I saw it, you know. So like that's okay. It's a white blur. That's what it is.
One day I came into the arcade early, and this was before they actually opened their doors to the public, and the only person who was there was a technician at the time, and the technician's name was John. And the arcade's kind of shaped like a Y, and so you enter in, and then it shoots off to a left and a right section. And so I go into the arcade and I start looking for John so I can bug him and just pester him because that's what I like to do. And I see someone running to the left of the split inside the arcade. So I kind of chase after him, thinking it's John. I'm going to go bug John. And then I turn that left corner, and then behind me, I hear John say, "Oh, good morning, Michael." And I turn around, and then I look back, and nobody's there. And so, I'm always left wondering, who that was. And, in GameWorks, you just chalk that up to, oh, that must have been the white blur.
It's just something that we all kind of become endeared to, and created a really kind of an interesting community behind it, because everyone who's seen it always just kind of laughs and jokes and smiles about it. But even people who don't know about it seem to have seen it in passing, and there's been conversations had outside of here with people, adults, like people who aren't inside of our circle and our community, who have actually seen it and are like, what was that? So it's not like it's just us projecting that onto people. There's people who know nothing about it who have said, "Hey, I think I saw something in your store the other day when I was walking by. It was like 12 o'clock at night. I came out of the movies, and when I walked by, I could have swore I saw somebody in there." And, it's like, "Oh, yeah, what did it look like?" It's like a kid in a white T-shirt. It's like, okay. So. All of a sudden I get this phone call that says, "Hey, by the way, you're going to be out of a job tomorrow. Oh, and by the way, you get to tell all your people this." And anyone that knows me and my managerial style is I treat everybody like their family. So now you're telling me that I have to go and tell all of my quote-unquote kids that they're out of jobs. Their livelihood is gone. The place they like to hang out is closing down, and that's it.
And I received a phone call from my boss, Victor, and he tells all of us to come to the arcade because it's being shut down, and we need to get all of our personal items out of the arcade. But don't worry, there's some people here who are looking to buy it.
Luckily, our current owners of this location had come in literally the day after we closed and said, "Hey, I'm looking at the place. Show me around." I showed him around, showed him what we had, what the deal was. He asked me some questions, both about GameWorks and about what I thought about our location. And then said that they were thinking about buying a location, possibly reopening because it's a good location.
It was kind of weird for the first week or two, because when I walked back in, they didn't just buy the location, they also bought all the games.
We are all so excited, because obviously when you work for one company, you develop a whole bunch of kind of nitpicks and pet peeves about things that company did wrong, and you're really hoping that these new people come in and do a much better job. And to be honest, the new company abused that arcade.
With GameWorks, they had the food, the drinks, the music that was playing in the background, that friendly music, that music that kept you hyped.
The new model is, we got rid of the small food and beverage section that we had. We filled all of that with ticket and prize games.
Which for some people is really exciting, but the fact that you could get pizza or hot wings at the arcade was really exciting and was a part of the ambiance. They didn't want to pay the licensing fees for music, so the music that played through the arcade was off, and so kind of the atmosphere of the grills going in the back and the music playing over the loudspeakers was gone, and so now the arcade was just silence with a couple arcade machines, a track mode on.
Come to this arcade that you normally hear all the games rumming, making their fight noises, to it being completely quiet. It wasn't the same place anymore.
And an arcade that doesn't have new games coming in and their games aren't constantly working is an arcade people don't want to go to. And it seemed like they weren't shipping in any new games. If they did ship in a game, it was a 10, 15-year-old game that was incredibly broken, and they only had one technician to cover these 200 games, and they would, the games would break all the time, and they wouldn't give him the kind of help that he needed in order to fix the machines, and then whenever they shipped in a new machine, it would be a broken machine, and they just, I don't know, man, it's kind of weird. It's the same it's the same space, for the most part the same machines, but because of the lack of care, I just kind of watched it deteriorate.
So it was a demographic switch. GameWorks was not as family oriented. GameWorks was much more of a hangout oriented type of location.
I feel like when they decided to do that, they pretty much changed it from this, teenager, young adult hangout spot to a kiddie area. And, sadly, I feel like that was like one of the things that took away a lot of the customers that used to come, to the same location when it was GameWorks.
And you go there on a Friday and it's dead. And that's crazy to think about for an arcade. I go to a different arcade that's close to where I live right now, and I can go there on a Wednesday, and it's busier on a Wednesday than that arcade is on a Friday. That's really shocking.
I feel like our white blur decided he was angry and he didn't like the switch.
After the new company took over, I actually don't think I've heard of any sightings of the White Blur.
But the truth is, the people who took part in the legend, the people who heard the stories, they've all moved on.
The problem is there has to be somebody left to tell you those stories, and a lot of times I'm the only one left.
Circle Center Mall is losing businesses, they say right and left. The Arcade and Entertainment Center on the mall's top floor is the latest to go. This comes just weeks after the Regal movie theater shut down, and other businesses raised red flags about the state of business inside that mall. And as the property's new owners look to revamp that site into a multi-use development.
Here it's like, unless we tell people about it, where there's a conversation where someone overhears it, the crew know about it, but it's just not something that's endeared upon by the people that come in, so the story doesn't get spread. So as the company's changed, it kind of reduced the popularity of the idea of it, but there's still people that are like, what's the White Blur? And there's still people who I know the answer to this, but they'll still walk up to me and be like, what's the White Blur? Just to see what I tell them. So it's just I keep it alive as much as possible, and I know that other people outside of here, and a lot of the other regulars that were really entrenched in forming the community that was here in the past, still keep it alive. So we still have a sign in the back that's on the forklift that somebody wrote that says, "What's the White Blur?" It's still there. Like no one's ever touched it. But every new crew member who ends up coming through has walked up to me and said, "What is the White Blur?" Because they read that board and they're like, "What is that?" And then I have to explain it to them. And then once I explain it to them, like I'll let it simmer for a while. Like I won't say anything about it. It's like, ask me again in about 2 minutes. And then they'll go walk around, and then eventually, inevitably, 1 out of 3 of them will walk back up to me. It's like, there's just something weird about this place. I saw this thing out of the corner of my eye. I'm like, now ask me that question. And I'll explain it to them. They're like, oh. So it's cool. It's our own version of Bigfoot.